5-minute law, I want to move fast.
Delay.
Ask him.
I don't even want to ask him.
What you can do, to get around this procedurally, is suspend this meeting, open the meeting, then come back to your meeting, and then go back to him.
I just suspended mine and I was told he could open his, so that's what I offered him to do.
This is all parliamentary.
I apologize.
We have 8 members of council working, we need to move ahead.
Okay, I'm going to call the Economic Development Committee meeting to order. Today is March 5th, 2020, 5 o'clock. Is there courtesy of the floor? Seeing none, we're going to go back to the prior meeting and continue.
Okay. I don't want to, let me put it this way, I'll try.
Okay.
It's an offside. Another victim of parliamentary procedure, darn it. Anyway, let me just say, I remember with Second Harvest, one of the problems was cyclical at times, because I know there were times when there were certain areas they didn't have much, and then all of a sudden they'd have more than what they knew to do with. And you're never going to have enough, per se. Who is hungry, who isn't hungry, who needs food. But is there any reason, since this really sort of grew from this resolution supporting this, do you see anything negative in council passing a resolution supporting the state increased funding? I mean, I don't see it impacting you negatively. That's all I'd be interested in.
No, I think, as my human services folks always say, if the state would like to provide us with more funding, we will be happy to make sure it goes to the folks who are in need.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I doubt the legislature will pass it at the state level, but, I mean, you know, you don't see a problem with us supporting it. That's all.
I do not.
I don't either.
Okay, you had mentioned food vouchers. How do people get to that? To the point, yes, because that was part of your presentation.
Food vouchers. Oh, are you talking about children and youth? Yeah. Okay, so we don't, yes, I was thinking you meant something else. So our families who call and are in need, or our families that we're already involved with, who for whatever reason are in need of food a particular week or month, there is a system internally they have set up in children and youth that they provide, I said vouchers, it's mostly gift cards to the local grocery stores for families to be able to go and purchase groceries to meet their immediate needs. So it's more of an emergency basis, but I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay. Along with that, we're getting a real good view into what exactly we're doing as a county. So you're saying your total is about $3 million is what we're annually putting out there for people?
Food and housing is over 3 million. It was either 3.1 or 3.2. I'd have to redo the math. That's for Department of Human Services for food and housing. We'll call it insecurity.
And then another just over 500,000 from DCD.
And one of the things I didn't mention is our aging division has their own little pantry in our office that for when there was some additional funding left over last year, we purchased non-perishables. So when we have specifically protective services cases for older adults and we come to realize that they don't have any food in the apartment or their home, we can provide them with that as well. That wasn't in my numbers, but that is something else that we do.
Well, I want to thank you for your detail and getting this back to us, because I'm really not aware until now just how much we're putting out there. And this really needs to get to the public more than what it is at this point right now.
I was saying that since I started here. One of my first questions was to my folks, how, coming from the private sector, we market, we advertise, how do we do that at the county? And it's a different answer. We're not using taxpayers' money to advertise per se, so it's about getting our folks in the community, which we do, and most of the folks who need us find us, but there are always folks in need that we know don't find us. But a lot of folks don't know what we do because they're not in need of our services, but certainly anyone who is, we don't want to miss one person. So even if one person needs us, we want to make sure we're finding ways to get to them.
To follow that up, what can we do as the county council people, commissioners, whatever you want to call us, how can we help you best get that information to the people in Northampton County?
One of the things that I started to do is I carry around everywhere I go the contact information for our Information Referral and Emergency Services Division. And you had asked how we access all of these programs. And essentially, anytime you have a need within Human Services, that's who you call. Whether you're an employee who is having personal familial issues or somebody within the county, there are gatekeepers, and they know where to direct everybody better than anybody else. So happy to supply you with some of those for when you're out and about in the community and you come into contact with folks or organizations. That's really the kind of the best way for people to get in touch with us.
I'll take that.
I will get you some.
Thank you. Any other questions?
The only question is that
I will.
procedurally then, we tabled a resolution regarding this. We found out what we do. We found out that what they're saying doesn't impact them at all and would help support. So what would be the process? Will we put it to a regular council meeting to take it off the table and then pass it? Or just, like, what do we do with the resolution that we tabled? If we want to support that letter or
Resolution that you put out.
The solicitor would,
You have to take it off the table.
at a regular council meeting, not through this mechanism, correct?
would it matter if it's on the agenda or not? So you could untable it tonight
Yes.
if you wanted to, and just pass it?
Yes.
Got
Sent
it.
you a memo last week that any council member at any meeting can introduce a resolution, not an ordinance, but a resolution.
A resolution, not an ordinance.
Which you had. So
Yeah, it
I
was a
just want to say I appreciate your patience in this, and I appreciate
Yeah.
what you did, because that way I think it's clear to us now what we are doing,
Right.
how it would help, and that it would not be in conflict in any way, or it would actually support
actually
other
helps.
resources. So thank you for allowing that, and
Sure.
I would be in support of taking it off the table this evening.
No.
Thank you.
Seeing none, we're going to move on to presentation of the Greater Eastern Development Partnership.
So moving on, as you said, we have Jared Mast, who's with us tonight, who is the director of the Greater Eastern Development Partnership, is going to talk a little bit about their organization and specifically some of the work that he's been concentrating on in the West Ward.
See if this works this time.
That's an international meme now.
Thank you.
There's a couple more here too. Tina, I don't know if you're gonna need. It looks like one business. Yeah, I have more back there. This is a PDF. You should be able to go full screen. Probably about 6 months ago. I think it wasn't in this calendar year, and I think it was before. I know, this year's gone really fast.
I got you guys.
See, that's what we need.
Sure. Just go view full screen.
Jared, Eddie's.
Yeah. Got some of the height. Not all the height. That's fine. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Enjoy, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, when we used to have a basketball court. I think we're good. Well, you can take your USB. Other duties as assigned.
I don't think you want me.
So am I waiting for
Before you get started, could you give us your name again for the record, please?
My name is Jared Mast. At Easton City Council, give our address. I live at 800 Ferry, which is right around the corner. And I work at 325 Northampton Street, downtown above the Easton Public Market. I'm the executive director of the Greater Easton Development Partnership. We're a nonprofit based in a downtown focused on Easton. With about 20 employees and a $3 million budget. Our mission is to collaborate to nurture Easton's economic well-being and cultural vibrancy. And the work we do includes a lot of programs that are more visible than GDP itself. So the Easton Farmers Market, the Easton Public Market, larger special events like PA Bacon Fest. We're adopting Heritage Day this year. The Easton Main Street Initiative, the Easton Ambassadors Clean and Safe Program, which the county has supported historically, Community Gardens Program, the Easton Murals Program, and the Residential Compost Program, which also the county supported this year. We have an ex officio seat on our board for the staff of DCD, and Mark Hartney has that seat. And Mark and Tina asked me to come today to talk a little bit about the history of the West Ward Plan, the county's role in that, and kind of where we are today. So going back to 2016, I had a conversation with Mark, and CACLB had left the West Ward, and there was kind of a vacancy in terms of organizations trying to do good work. And, there was kind of an encouragement to look at revising or revisiting a neighborhood plan. The county had launched the SIP program at that point, and so we applied for a SIP grant. We received $40,000 in funds, and we were able to go down a path of updating a neighborhood plan with that investment from the county. The state matched that with $20,000 in funds, so the overall kind of project cost for the plan was $60,000. The board, which you probably can't read, involved members of the community, members from various partners, partner institutions, included Becky Bartlett from the county. Yeah, so there is a steering committee on the first page of the report if you want to look into that. In case you're not familiar, the area of the West Ward is 6th to 15th Street in Easton. It doesn't cross over municipal boundaries into Wilson. It goes from the Lehigh River essentially to the Bushkill Creek, and for most people includes a cemetery, even though that's not a residential portion of the neighborhood. But it is a resource. I mean, we go walk, and it's the kind of only green space really in the neighborhood. So we had various goals: engage residents, implement projects, and identify funding programs that could support the work. I'm not going to read all this, but May 2018 through February 2019, we worked on the plan. We had multiple community meetings. We had various iterations of the plan. And then in May 2019, we finally brought it to Easton City Council for adoption. We looked at demographics of the neighborhood. We looked at community assets. We asked folks for what they wanted the West Ward to be, kind of aspirational thoughts about where the neighborhood could go if they're looking at it optimistically. And we created a vision for the West Ward that kind of set the table for the rest of the plan. I can read this. The historic West Ward will continue to become a colorful, safe, inclusive, and desirable neighborhood, fully integrated into Easton's vibrant urban fabric. Residents will have access to affordable education and training opportunities, local jobs and support services. Local amenities will be connected by a robust system of sidewalks, bike routes, and tree-lined streets. Parks and open space will host unique events and art installations that draw visitors and showcase local creativity. Residents of all colors, backgrounds, cultures, ages, abilities, faiths, and incomes will be proud to call the West Ward home, and we'll work together to make it a neighborhood of choice. That should really be a vision statement for any neighborhood, I feel, but there's some specifics in there that were kind of pulled from various community partners. There are very specific elements of the plan in terms of focus area and corridors, green space, mapping out assets like Paxenosa Elementary School, Two Rivers Health and Wellness. We looked at some of those hubs and kind of distilled the plan into 6 guiding principles. Celebrate history and diversity, expand economic prosperity, foster strong neighborhoods, improve mobility and access, enhance open space and recreation, and advance equal opportunity. So again, not earth-shatteringly new ideas, but definitely created a kind of roadmap of principles for us to work around. And then we talked about implementation steps. We talked about specific elements of each principle. We're not going to go through all of this, expand it. And then we moved into implementation. So, the reason SIP would support a plan is because it eventually leads to follow-on investments and the implementation phase. A plan that's paid for by the county or anyone that sits on a shelf really is probably a wasted investment. So we took the plan and we tried to find partners and funders that could put it to work. So the first one is probably the most important, the Neighborhood Partnership Program. This is a program that CACLV employs very successfully throughout the Lehigh Valley. We were able to get 4 corporate partners to step up and commit $300,000 over 6 years. So Lafayette Ambassador Bank, now Fulton Bank, People's Security Bank, Highmark Life Insurance, and PNC Bank. It's a tax credit program from the state where they essentially give you the money and then have an 80% plus tax credit on their tax filing. So that was awarded in 2019. In getting a new program underway, it's a lot of work just to get balls in the air, but we were able to do that and I think had a successful first year. So kind of transitioning to a recap of that first year, we're now moving into year 2, but wanted to talk a little bit about the West Ward Community Initiative, which was a result of that plan. So in terms of leverage, we took the $40,000 from the county, the $20,000 from the state, and have a 6-year program that's supported by $1.2 million from private partners. So some highlights, we tried to kind of work around certain committees, one of which was design. So this is the Easton Area Community Center. It's formerly saying I grew up playing basketball there. So if you remember what it used to look like, it had glass block windows. The city was able to put CDBG funding towards those windows, but there was still a gap of about $26,000. So we stepped up and kind of helped fill that gap through the MPP. So in that instance, we're a pass-through. We secured the funds from our corporate partners. They hit our account, but we're essentially distributing them to other folks in the community. Also under design, we have an Easton Murals program. We hadn't had a piece of public art in the West Ward up until this past fall. So we worked with various artists and came up with what we thought was an image that could bring pride and work with an artist that was very conducive to working with students. There's a couple daycares right around this, and so he was kind of talking about public art and his life as an artist as he was creating this, African-American artist from Philadelphia. Yep, right across from Terry Briggs's.
Oh, that's what I was trying
Yeah.
to figure out where wall that is.
Yeah. He tends to focus on juxtaposition of animals and other kind of imagery. So, I mean, it was a fiercer looking tiger, which we felt was a little bit maybe too aggressive for the kids. So he toned it down. I mean, he's a very... So we also supported, there was kind of a divide between downtown and West Ward. The downtown had snowflakes, the West Ward didn't, and so we're trying to increase equity. Not a huge investment, but we got our own snowflakes. Yeah, and so it will extend again this year in trying to unify the kind of the aesthetic, but also the unity of the community. We also created a logo, so this is something we kind of want to be around. We want people to be proud to be part of. The logo that you see kind of looks like a mishmash of shapes, but it's actually a very unique intersection in the West Ward. So you have around Porter's Pub. Yeah, so it's 7th, Wood, Prospect, Pine, and Northampton Street. So, yeah. Another priority was clean and safe, which kind of mirrors our clean and safe program in the downtown. As I mentioned, the Easton Ambassadors are something the county has supported. We included 72 new blocks of the West Ward in their territory. That works out to be about a $100,000 expense annually. Those are paid folks, they're not volunteers. People think that we are employing volunteers to pick up trash and defray different kind of police activity. And we've seen a lot of benefits from that. So not just the clean and safe, but we are using the ambassadors to get information out about various programs. They're maintaining planners, they're taking care of the public trash cans. They do some work around the county complex here on Walnut. And it's been really well received both by the county community, I think the legal community, and the residents of the West Ward. Another safety initiative was a Lights On campaign, which was essentially giving people LED light bulbs with a photocell. So when it gets dark, if you leave your switch up, it automatically goes on. The idea is that, you know, with certain corridors being better lit, there'll be, you know, a higher perception of safety and comfort in getting around the neighborhood. We also invested in outreach and kids programming. So we had kind of a collaborative event with National Night Out. 500 families came out around Paxton Elementary, worked with the school, we worked with various organizations. We were actually able to get on Cottingham Field. We did park programming through the summer. That was a partnership with the YMCA where we took about $20,000 of the neighborhood partnership program funding, and we hired or contracted with the Y to bring park counselors to 2 parks in the West Ward. It's something that existed when I was a kid in East End. You go to a park, there was some supervision. Yep. We also supported some events. So, you know, downtown has all kinds of events from Bacon Fest to Heritage Day to Clam Jam. And there were some business owners that wanted to do the same thing for the West Ward. So we kind of played a support role, paying for porta-johns or playing for a band, not really monetizing the event for ourselves, but trying to support various entrepreneurs in the neighborhood that wanted to try and bring people together. We created a monthly community newsletter called the West Ward One Pager. That's a direct mail piece that goes out to folks. We have been receptive and have fielded a lot of inquiries of getting information out to residents through that. One thing we heard over and over was it was very hard to connect with the West Ward. You know, there's some, you know, the West Ward One Pager is actually bilingual. It's Spanish on the back and English on the front. So there's language issues. There's folks that don't have access to technology. And so a kind of old-fashioned printed piece was something that we felt was a good way of addressing that. Community Gardens program in the West Ward was something we kind of reinvested in. This is a garden at 10th and Pine. We helped host, what's it called? Vegetables in the Community, which is a collaboration of Crayola, Lafayette College, and GDP, and hosting what's essentially a fresh food pantry once a week through the summer. Lafayette and Crayola donate produce and volunteers. We kind of provide programming, and folks come out and have access to that produce. Yeah, it's the Allstate Fires parking lot there. There's a community garden there that we're in, you know, every day essentially, and then the, you know, the once a week event kind of is layered on top of that.
Can I ask a question about the
Sure.
garden? So how do people get involved in that? They just show up and they're given a piece, or like who gets to do the gardening and then?
Yeah, so we have we're trying to support Easton residents to start. So folks will show up with friends, or we have a Facebook page, we have a website. There's various ways to get in contact with the community gardens coordinator. We also have garden captains at each garden. So you have someone that is kind of a super volunteer that kind of helps arrange events and also helps recruit new volunteers. The garden at Lower Hackett, which is a city-owned park, does have some folks from outside of Easton. It's a larger space, has a parking lot, so you know, it's something that we're open to and supporting some outside gardeners as well. But the gardens that are embedded in the community are really there to support the residents.
But do residents actually come out and say, I want to work this, or I want to do, like,
Yeah, they're used. They are used.
again, if you don't have a lot of property, but you have that kind of
Right.
inkling that you could actually participate.
Some
or you
people come
plan
out and
it.
grow things that they can't buy. You know, there's some ethnic foods that are hard to get locally. We've seen that at the Hackett's Garden with certain types of grasses. And the folks in this picture are actually Lebanese women, Lebanese American women. So they grow something that they can't get at the store. And then there are folks that just don't have the backyard for a garden and come to us for a plot. And, you know, we support it with a full-time person. The City of Easton's Department of Public Works is very supportive. They help us with moving mulch, moving dirt, repairing various things, adding fences. So that's a very active collaboration with not just the college and Crayola, but also the city.
And do people bring their own things, or is like when they get there, the seed there, or the dirt, or all the tools, or
So we
is
get
all
some seed
provided?
and plant donations that we distribute. We do some seed and plant swaps. Miranda, who's the manager of the program, also does some seed starts based on what she thinks people will want. So it's a variety of things. We get the seed farm and various organizations sometimes donate plants to us, and we act as a conduit for that. We actually just got a Department of Ag, Pennsylvania Department of Ag grant for a greenhouse, so that'll allow us to kind of scale up a little bit and partner with the Easton Urban Farm and start growing more seedlings for the program. I already mentioned the partners in the Neighborhood Partnership Program, but again, this is a very, I think, important funding mechanism from the state. It gives community organizations 6 years of planning to kind of start thinking through. It's not something that you have to reapply for every year. You do have to reapply, but it's essentially a renewal application. So it allows you to think a little bit longer term. It also has led to, it's also led to some other things. So we got an EPA grant or an EPA technical assistance grant to support looking at one thing that was identified in the plan is how do you make the neighborhood safer for pedestrians and bikers, and how do you have the walking territory of Paxton Elementary School function a little bit better? There's some parents who are concerned about the safety of kids and the crosswalks. And so we developed this plan. I'm not going to go through the whole plan, but kind of from a 30,000-foot view, you're looking to kind of connect to various assets. You're looking at the community gardens as kind of green space, the cemeteries as green space. And then where we got eventually is kind of looking at primary corridors, secondary corridors, some bike infrastructure that might be piloted in the next few years, but trying to connect to regional assets. The other thing that the plan after year one is we were able to secure another grant for $850,000 from a foundation that has a specific opportunity around plan implementation. So you can't go for a plan implementation grant until you have a plan. So kind of in summary, you know, we're able to get the 1.2 million through the MPP. We're able to get another 850,000 through some other partners. We're trying to continue to grow the impact of the neighborhood. That 850,000 will support the St. Anthony's or Easton Area Community Center with STEAM programming and athletic mentors for kids. We just are a pass-through for a bulk of the funding to the Easton Area Community Center and to actually Lafayette College to support some of that work. We have active grant applications in with other partners. The Safe Route to School concept is something I've talked to DCD about, I've talked to United Way about, I've talked to Two Rivers Health and Wellness. I think as we continue to add support for kids in the neighborhood, you know, we'll see continued positive impact around families and home ownership. So happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Yes, Tom.
Okay. What's Lafayette's contribution and what are they doing for you? Are they, you know, because I thought they had a garden up at,
They do. So La Farm, the Lafayette farm, supports or produces the majority of the produce for that vegetables and community program.
that's coming out of the, behind the sports complex
Yep.
at Metzger.
Yeah. They also provide student volunteers. They provide staff resources. They've provided technical assistance in the grant writing process, so they help support the neighborhood partnership program application through their consultant. And we weren't required to foot the bill for that. So that's a direct financial contribution, I would say, although it didn't technically come to GDP directly.
Okay, now, with limited green space,
Yep.
and you know I'm getting ready to hit you over the head with,
Yeah.
Cottingham Stadium, which is now ground to a halt.
Yep.
That looks like it's going to turf, but I understand there's going to be some kind of agreement that they're going to keep it open for use of the community. Have you heard the same thing? whenever they decide, to figure out what they're doing with that.
We worked with the school district last summer. They opened the gates to Cottingham. They actually let kids play on the field. There weren't any issues during that summer program, if you want to call it that. It represents a really significant opportunity. It's a $13 to $20 million public project that could have benefit beyond the football games. And we're supportive of thinking broadly and creatively of how to use the stadium and Vanderveer. So how do you get creative around parking needs for the games so that Vanderveer could serve the school and also the neighborhood? We're trying to reengage with the new superintendent, the school board. Certain school board members have been more supportive than others. And there's been some turnover there, so I think we need to kind of reengage and have that conversation again.
I'm assuming my intel, because I'm the varsity guy, bids and everything should be coming back soon. Is your plan still to try to use as much as Vanderveer as you can as green space?
I would say if we can figure out the parking, yes. You know, we've talked to the principal of Paxenosa, a functioning school playground area that kind of provides more diversity of play is something that she was intrigued by. You know, I understand that there's parking needs on game nights, but the city has been creative about looking at angled parking, you know, moving certain areas one way for game nights. So I think everything's on the table, and we just want to make sure that, you know, compromises are being considered at least, instead of just dismissed.
Are they also going to allow you to use the space that they're not allowing folks to use now behind Paxenosa?
A lawn.
Yes.
They did allow us to use that for the Park Leader program, but it is a fenced-in area, and there was a concern about trash being left behind, and then it became locked at some point. So overall, the school district and the principal of Paxenosa has been great, and it's a matter of trying to formalize some of this as the bids come in and the design gets probably tweaked a little bit more.
Okay, just one other thing. I am your Eastern representative, so if possible, information gets sent to me and maybe meetings so I can possibly attend.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I had two, and that, what Carrie said, I know executive committees, a lot has to do with neighborhood stakeholders, people that get money, but would you consider a member of council as liaison?
Sure.
Because I would suggest the District 2 representative, particularly in this case, Mr. Myers, if he could be considered a liaison to your
7:30
board.
a.m. once a month.
No?
I'm retired now.
Yeah, so we have an active steering committee, which involves a lot of partners, city,
Yeah.
Councilman O'Connell from the Easton.
Right. I mean, it's really helpful sometimes for council when we have somebody, they're either on a board, or if we don't have a board, a liaison, because we get presentations, and no matter who it's from, administration, others, but sometimes then it can be more filled out. Sometimes our liaisons or members can give us more information. The second thing I had was, since we are a neighbor in the West Ward, one of your biggest neighbors, I think what you're doing is great, and I think these initiatives in Easton, we all know Easton only has so much area that they're corporate. I call it corporate, but you know what I mean, businesses, restaurants.
Right.
So much of it was, and still is, resident-based. In the West Ward, at times it's been challenging. I have some friends who live in the West Ward, one family that owns a home. For some of the situations that you're working with and trying to improve the community, do you have, I know this, I'm crossing a line with this city, but since you have this initiative, are you involved with the city in working to, let's just say, put landlords' feet to the fire in terms of property maintenance? And I mean, I know it's difficult, but I'm just wondering if you have involvement, because if you want to have a strong community, it's going to take everybody being involved, and that means people who may not even be anywhere near this area who own properties.
Right.
And get rent in the mail.
So the city is responsive. The ambassadors represent kind of a conduit for that. They're eyes and ears on the street. You know, if somebody puts a mattress out that's, but they also have it's the ability to kind of trigger or escalate some code enforcement issues.
Yeah.
In, you know, in.
So if your group sees something or somebody brings it to your attention,
Yeah.
you have communications with
Right.
the city. That's
Yep.
good.
I would say that, you know, we've also gone to the point of considering funding a code enforcement officer through a grant request that would be specific to strategic initiatives around blight or code enforcement. And we're not there yet, but it is something that we would consider to help move the needle on some of those things a little bit more. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Myers.
Just a statement, the city is moving away from these apartments that people come and buy and fix, and they're putting a kibosh to it. So they want more homeowners now in the West Ward than we had absentee landlords. So that's something that's been put out to council, and council's moving with it.
Yeah, as part of our next fiscal year, we've allocated some funds to support an outside partner to do first-time homebuyer classes. Another thing that we'd like to do, either in partnership with the county or outside of the county, is to support deconversion grants. So if, you know, there's some, we didn't buy a multi-unit, we bought a house that had a lot of damage, but, you know, there's some folks who might want a single-family home, but they've been chopped up in weird ways, and it doesn't pencil out to try and buy that house and turn it back into a family home unless you provide some subsidy, so.
Mr.
Yes.
No, I just want to follow up, because I have a friend who owns some homes in Allentown, he rents his landlord. I don't want to bash landlords, he's a decent guy. But the thing is, in Easton, I'm wondering, I know other areas have done that too, deconverting.
Yep.
And there's incentives, but there's always going to be a number of people who want to rent, particularly younger people.
Right.
They're just not in an economic position. And so when it's not feasible to deconvert or something, I guess the question would be, and I'm probably asking the wrong person, if I am, just say so. I'm not offended. Are you looking into the idea of affordable? Because I know that's an issue. I mean, that is we've talked about that numerous times. It's across the entire Lehigh Valley.
Housing, but
Everything's a luxury apartment nowadays. And
we would support affordable homeownership through the land
Yeah.
trust, through the redevelopment authority. We would support affordable rentals
All right.
through fair or LIHTC
Yeah.
tax credits. There are good landlords and there are bad landlords,
Yeah.
and, you know, I think it's more about the balance of having streets with some invested homeowners and having good
Oh, no.
landlords alongside them, and we
I
don't.
think Easton could be a really great residential city. I mean, it needs some help, and it needs to, I don't know, Mr. Myers knows more about it than I do, but I just think Easton, you know, it could be really nice, ultimately, at the end of the day.
Any other questions? Yes.
These deconversion incentives, like, you're applying for money for that, or you already have it and you're looking for partnerships, or
We have not applied for, we had a.
what are the sources, I guess?
So we tried to include it in the neighborhood partnership program budget when we went into it with a $300,000 a year budget, but one of our partners who we thought might be at the table was not able to step up. And so that was one of the things that kind of fell off. So at this point, you know, the grant that I mentioned, the $850,000 grant, is not something that can be used for brick and mortar. So I would say that we're still looking for an opportunity to do that. You know, we don't do housing, we do facade grants, which kind of is our only toe in the water there, but we would work with the redevelopment authority in the county to gauge interest in a program like that through like a first-time homebuyer class, and then try to go after additional resources. I don't know if you want to comment on that at all, or that's my idea, I guess. All right.
I don't know, like, well, I guess I asked, where would you go to get money for those kinds of things? Are there grants out there through the state, through the feds? Is it private?
State, you could go after state funds. We could reallocate neighborhood partnership program funds to something else. So in pulling, you know, you have to make some hard choices around a budget. And so that's the most flexible pool of funds that we have, that $200,000 per year. And as things get a little bit more mature, we could look at allocating a portion of that and seeing if there's actually interest in the program. But not all funds are infinitely flexible, so it's about trying to find an opportunity. There is a lot of money in housing grants, you know, affordable housing grants from the banks, and there's CRA mandate. There's various foundations that support housing initiatives, and you know, we're looking at those. It's just can't go after everything all at once.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the presentation, and I have a couple things. thank you very much for what you do, because it sounds like you took up something that was shelved and you gave it life, and it sounds like you've got a lot of life going from the grants you're getting, and it's people like you that make our communities great, so thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very much.
And I thank the county for, having some optimism in, where we were trying to take it, and, would encourage the county to support good organizations that need to do planning first before they can kind of start going after additional funds, so
One,
thank you
couple
for having me.
quick questions. The 20 people, employees, that's mostly ambassadors, is that?
That doesn't even count ambassadors.
That doesn't count ambassadors, that's 20 employees,
Yep.
wow.
The ambassadors are contracted service. They do all the HR. It's a specialized training program that, so yeah, those 6 or 7 or 8 ambassadors, depending on seasonal fluctuations, would bring the total up to like 28.
Wow. And I was so happy to see that you're doing work on St. Anthony's. One of your board members, Jim Eniger, and I, along with the Carpenters Union, put that kitchen in many years ago, and that building needed so much, but it was used so much by the community. It was so important. I mean,
It's used by seniors, it's used by kids. It used to be used by Easton Catholic where I went, but
yeah, it's a very well-used building, and
It's
it
a
just,
tired building.
it's a tired building, and wow, it was like, it just, everywhere you looked, it needed something. So I was so proud of our group putting that kitchen in, because it served meals to a lot of young,
it does.
Community
Thousands
members
and
there.
thousands of meals a year.
Still does.
yes, Mr.
Just
Myers.
one thing, could you make sure Linda gets the information I need to make an
Yeah, so I'll
appearance?
send, and you'll distribute it, okay.
Also, when your meetings are, so I can make an appearance at 7:30 in the morning.
Okay.
Look, I spent many a day at St. Anthony's used to coaching kids for 30 years, so I spent a lot of time there. Had a lot of wins.
Thank you again
All right,
for
thank
your
you.
presentation. Moving along, we're going to discuss the Emergency Management Service Grant Program and resolution.
Not really a whole lot to discuss. We had already kind of had some first responders at our last month's meeting, if you recall, and we distributed their letters of support for this program. So our ask tonight is just to ask council for that request to please pass this resolution so that we can proceed with the new grant program.
Does anybody have any questions on the resolution? Or,
Right,
It's
yeah,
for tonight.
they asked, and we're considering it. Do we have, I guess the only concern would be, I mean, it's very hard when you talk about first responders, if you don't say yes to anything that's said, you're opening yourself up, particularly on YouTube. But the thing is, there have been issues over the years with certain areas of first response in the area of maybe fire, emergency service, and certain providers. So I'm not against the grant. I'm all, the grant's fine. It's just how we're going to make the determination to distribute money, the safeguards on the money. And I know you touched on this before, but the fellows were here, and I got it, and that was more of an emotional pitch. I'm still feel, though, I have to ask the actual practical application. Whoever wants to, I mean.
I want to say, I want to frame, since we're on YouTube, I want to be famous too. And I want to sort of frame Mark's response to your question.
Yep.
And so DCED really takes care of your money. They administer grant programs with these big, thick contracts, and they assign a staff person at DCED to overlook and engage in oversight and to follow up and require reports and to make sure the money gets spent and to make sure it gets spent on what it was meant to. And they're so serious about it, Mr. President, that they were giving the Friends of Graysdale a hard time about the $5,000 from the contingency fund until it made its way to me. And I said, look, council gets to do whatever it wants with that money. Give them the money, you know. But they wanted the Friends of Graysdale to enter into the contract, which they did, but their contracts have insurance certification provisions in them. Because we want to be protected. They're doing such a good job with these, the management of these contracts. But I said, it's the Friends of Graysdale, they don't need an insurance. I waived that requirement for them. So anyway, Mark will tell you what they're gonna do.
Yeah,
As part of the application process, we require them to submit their financial statements. Hopefully, they're audited, but if they're not, some organizations aren't that sophisticated, don't need, but we need to be able to look at their financial statements.
And we always have the right to audit.
Right,
Yes.
right.
yeah, I mean,
And insurance certificate.
and don't get me wrong, I know, and I know we've talked, and I've seen what you do with your auditing and your, it's just, I mean, Friends of Graysdale, it's almost like a pussycat compared to the world. I only ask because I did this in Lehigh County, and it was, I would say maybe one step higher than dealing with municipalities in terms of money, because a lot of these are almost like family businesses. And you go in and say, well, we'll give you X, but we need you to provide Y, and you would be thinking you were asking for the firstborn or something.
The other
That's all.
thing that, and we would run this program, it's on a reimbursement or cost incurrence basis. So we don't just give you the money and say, please go spend it the way you told us to. They either line up the services and have a contract or an invoice of some sort that they submit, and then we reimburse them for that. So they have to make the expenditure or have that cost incurrence, a contract first, and provide that documentation to us, and then we give them the actual amount that cost.
And you're,
Right, yes.
Right.
Everything's documented.
and you're going to be administering it, so I mean, you know, if there's any complaints, they'll come to you, and I would think council would probably say, don't bring them here. Unofficially, I'm saying that, you know, you can bring anything here.
Is there any other questions on this resolution? I'd just like to mention myself that it is a 50% match. It's a $10,000 per project award. Is there any other discussion needed on? The people who get the grant would be
Oh, I see,
matched.
they're, it's part of the funding.
It's their buy-in.
I guess the only question I have is how does it impact the total amount of the table games that we have?
We have the money in
have-
the budget for it.
So it doesn't preclude any other program?
No,
I like the idea that they have to match, and I think it'd be good for them to think on what they need, how they do it. And would it be an annual, or are we just gonna do it one and done, or?
No, this will become an annual.
And what's the term?
program.
It's an annual, it's 2 years, it's,
No, it's annual.
okay.
Chairman, all we need now is a motion to move this forward?
Yeah, we're going to move it forward to the full council. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second?
You should be on the committee.
Oh, I'm
Thank you.
sorry. I know that.
We don't need to second it. Never mind. You can second it.
I think it's a great program, and I'm proud that the county dug in to get these resources that they need. They're gonna be up against it with the news, first responders coming in. I mean, they're gonna need all the help they can get.
Yeah, it's already popular. We've gotten emails on a weekly basis. When is this happening? So I anticipate a lot of applications coming in for this. Good, great. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move this resolution forward, but we can still, if there's still any other questions, seeing none, I will adjourn this committee meeting.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
Okay. I like your socks.